That's how it works. Okay, guys. So we're going to talk about building your own first-party analytics stack. So the talk before this, I was here with Steen and Simon and Petri, and we were talking about all the problems of Google Analytics 4 and how scary it is for companies right now, right? Because what are you going to do, and you don't know, like, will the new rulings be enough or not, right? So you're basically building in uncertainty. So another option for a company could be, if of course they have the resources, to go away from the pre-built stack, whether it's Google Analytics or Adobe or whatever, and go the custom build route. So I want to talk to you guys about that, because I know you guys been dabbling with those kind of things. So let's do a quick round of introduction. Maybe Niels, you want to start out?
Yeah. So Niels, I need to talk into it.
Yeah, you need to.
I didn't listen to you. Working for the data story, building data stacks for different companies. One of the tools that we use there to some extent is, for example, Snowplow, but also GA4. So that decision between building your own or using GA is something we encounter a lot.
Yeah. Christophe, one of the co-founders at Tasman, also consultancy. We work a lot with the modern data stack, so a lot of Snowplow, but also hosted variants like Segment, like GA4. So we see both sides very much. I also used to work at Snowplow before, starting Tasman, so I have a bit of that insider perspective there as well.
Inside knowledge.
Exactly.
Okay, cool. I'm Glenn, co-founder of Human37. Basically, we're a customer data strategy agency. We work on helping clients build a customer data strategy infrastructure, but also making sure that the data gets valued through what we call experience delivery. So basically, GA4, Mixpanel, RudderStack, Amplitude, and a lot of CDPs and Reverse ETL.
Yeah. So I think we have a lot of people on this table who have a lot of different types of clients with different use cases, and I think we all know that it depends question, right? Like what tool do you need? It depends, right? So let's get that out of the way. It depends. But let's say this client, for them, it makes a lot of sense to go build your own first-party analytics data stack. Where do you start? Like what is your first question? What are you looking at?
So you're talking about they already made the decision to do so.
They made the decision, right? So they figured out we're either too scared of Google Analytics being ruled illegal anyway in the future. So we're gonna go either with Snowplow or totally build it yourself. Doesn't really matter. But let's just assume they want to build their own stack because they know the data is really valuable to them, and they don't want to risk putting it in some third party's control or bucket, right? So they made that decision. Now they have to actually go do it, right? So what are the next steps?
I think multiple topics. So I'll bring up one. Get the resources. So which people are gonna make available to set this whole thing up, and who are the people who are gonna make the decisions on some of the architectural tool, environment cloud-based systems that you're going to use in this setup. Those would be one of my first things that I want to get tackled before we progress somewhere. Sure, people will add.
There is an extra decision that needs to be made, which is build your own versus do first-party data collection and analytics, but still in a hosted or managed or open source, pre-developed and deploy yourself kind of way. So there's various gradations there. Right? Typically, fully building the end-to-end pipeline yourself, I think that is, in most cases, I think not recommended. It's maybe a fun hackathon project. Like you can get experience with the tools, you can test some things, but you're also on the hook for the long-term support and maintenance of that. A middle ground is probably open source or some of the alternatives that exist, which are increasingly easy to deploy as well with containerization and so on. We have the benefit of the whole product end-to-end is developed, maintained by a broad community, so you don't have to do all the data engineering yourself, so it's more focused on the deployment side of things. And then a step beyond that is I'm paying one of those companies to run it for you, but they still deploy it in your own cloud, so you maintain that first-party element.
Yeah.
And then you're really back into the same type of work you would need to do with GA, which is focusing on what do I want to track and then what do I do with the data on the other end. So you have that spectrum still, which is all first party. So it's still, you have the benefit from a privacy and a legal point of view, but the work is very different in each of those cases.
Yeah. So, and to make that specific, so Snowplow, for instance, offers this service, right? So you can get Snowplow to basically take care of your Snowplow installation for you.
Yep.
And then all you do is take that data, put it into Looker, Data Studio, whatever you want to throw on top of it, and you start unlocking that to your, right? So then in that case, the resources, right? The point that Niels made is, of course, like if you don't have the right people, then the rest will fail.
It defines also the decision there. So if you don't have the data engineers in house or not the ambition to move in that direction, then the solution to go to something hosted or managed is there. That is where the decision is, for a large extent, in my opinion, defined. Do you have the ambition to do it yourself, or maybe ambition or the need to do so, and the resources to do so?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I actually fully agree on that, in the sense that today you see, and as an extent of that discussion, you see a lot of CDP versus reverse ETL, right?
Yep.
You're smiling. But everybody's thinking is the same thing. I don't necessarily agree. I think they're also built for, or they belong in companies where reverse ETL is engineering first. CDPs is like, I have no intent or no idea on how to build it. And if you're talking about, I'm going to build my own data collection for web or app with everything, then probably you're an engineering company. And you need a lot of people to maintain that, to build that, to figure out like how is unification going to work, how am I going to reverse ETL everything out of there, unify it in my data warehouse, merge it in order to get that customer 360-degree view that the CDP theoretically gives you out of the box.
Yeah.
But there are two distinct things. And so when we're talking about like Snowplow, I think we're mostly looking into what is the behavioral analytics SDK in that stack we're trying to replace or switch out for GA4. Because to that extent, you could also say like GA4 is the SDK for BigQuery, and then what are we trying to replace?
Yeah, good point. So in that case, we're not looking at Google Analytics 4 as a graphical user interface. It's simply a way to transfer data into BigQuery.
Exactly.
Yep.
So the only downside with that is that the company that you're using to process the data into BigQuery is still subject to all those GDPR issues, right? So you might want to try to figure that out another way. But I think so. Recapping a little bit, like you need the resources to do anything, right? So even if you want to use Google Analytics 4, you need some resources, right? Probably a bit less, but you need somebody who can work with the tool and get some insights out. Let's say a company does have budget available, right? They don't have the people yet, but they do have budget available. Do you think it's feasible for them to say, okay, we're gonna, we'll get a data engineer, we'll get 2 or 3, and we'll stick a data analyst on top of that to make it work? Like what are the, let's say a company comes to you and says, well, I have the budget for that, I just don't have the people. Do you think it's feasible?
Feasible, yes. Wise? That's a different question.
Because what's the main issue in that case?
Again, comes down to if you fully want to build and deploy it yourself, yes, you can do that. It comes back to your point. Like, well, you're spending all that effort to recreate something that you can achieve in a different way. So if you have the budget, well, if you're going to spend half the budget or 70% of the budget on data engineers, great, it's going to take you a whole bunch of time and effort and money at the end of the day to get to that same point as maybe you could get quicker in a different way, even keeping with first-party analytics.
Yeah.
And then the question is, well, if it's going to take, if we have the budget, why not spend it on what we're going to do with that data and ultimately deliver the business value? I think it's easy to be distracted maybe by the fun of playing with all the new tools, and like that's the modern data stack. There's all these exciting open source projects, and I love all that. I'm absolutely into that. But at the end of the day, like there's a cost side of data as well. There's limited resources, especially maybe if we're going down in a recession and so on. Like budgets are being maybe cut. So given that, I think we have to be smart and disciplined with where we spend our limited resources, and I think it should be focused on how do we get to that value as efficiently as possible as well.
Yeah. So turning the data into action.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. So the last part of so basically we have to work backwards, right? We have to figure out what do we want to achieve. and then figure out what do we need to achieve that.
Yep.
And so it's also simple. I thought I invite you guys for the hard stuff.
We're skipping that.
So let's say we take the approach of working with what's out there, right? Like you mentioned, like there's a lot of open source stuff you can work with, or there's a lot of let's call them building blocks you can build up, right? But staying away from any third party, right? So your data will not end up at Google, maybe in Google Cloud, but not, in Google Analytics. What will be a stack? What will be something that you think is really feasible and you see being rolled out right now at companies that makes a lot of sense?
Yeah.
There's different components in the stack. So like you can go with a segment or Rudder stack, which are CDPs. They're fully integrated. They do a bit of everything, but they are not fully first party. Like you're still sending data to third party and you get it back. So legally, it's a bit of a different situation. GA is in that boat somewhat. For some elements in the stack, it's really easy to run and deploy things open source. Like it's a no-brainer. Like DBT, for example, for SQL transformations, it is open source, so you can self-host it, but it's like the easiest possible thing to set up and run. Like it's not something you need to be worried about if it's going to cause a lot of ongoing maintenance and so on. It's the lowest type of effort. You have then increasingly a few other elements in the stack, I think, which are getting close to that point of ease of use and ease of deployment. Maybe Airbyte, for example. I don't know if you've come across that, but that's in terms of just extracting data out of like Google Ads and Facebook Ads and loading it into your data warehouse. That has also become really easy to set up and run. Like you need to spend minimal engineering efforts to run it. With something like Snowplow, I think it's getting there in terms of the open source setup. Also looking at the roadmap, what they've planned. It's not quite there yet. That's the thing where, as you said, like if it's going to break on Saturday at 4 a.m., who's going to be on the hook to fix that? That's the problem. And if that stuff breaks, like you'll have data loss. Like, it's like, why is there a gap over the weekend? Well, it broke and no one was around to fix it.
Well, and even worse if it's not only being used for analysis, but also for like real-time activation,
Absolutely.
right? Like newsletter.
Your marketing budget is gone, basically. Yeah, and if you go back to the question of what does that stack look like? Indeed, you have these components, right? You have your analytics in general. So Snowplow has been mentioned here as an open source solution there. There are a couple of more. You have your data extraction, indeed. So an Airbyte is a good example of that. You have data transformation with DBT. My knowledge regarding data, how do you call that? Governance, management on open source is a bit limited. I'm not sure whether, because that's also sort of an important part there. Yeah, so, and then you have that, the most important steps covered.
Yeah.
I think the way I will look at it in general is like there's the whole data collection section, like could be web SDKs, app SDKs, or like ETL, like 5-channel, that stuff, getting it out and getting it into a central place. Then there's unification. Then there's your actual warehousing where you have like all of the different ways you visualize it with your visualizer on top. And in that unification, there's also somewhere your customer 360-degree view, and then you have the whole reverse ETL thing to get it out and
back into the system.
Yeah, back into the system. And on top of that unification engine, you also need some sort of like an audience builder to have like non-technical people figure out like, okay, all the people who subscribe to my newsletter and then never bought in the last 2 months, let's do something with that and just ship it as a flag, an attribute, whatever, to all your downstreams through reverse ETL solutions or whatever you want to call it, or CDPs as destinations. And that's the way I think today the modern data stack kind of looks like in compositions or components. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then it becomes a question of like, do I buy everything in one cycle? Or do I have already, as a scale-up or whatever, like half of it, and I just need a couple of extra pieces that I need to get it there? And then I guess that's where the whole point comes in, like, am I using, in this case, GA4 as an SDK to get it there, or am I using something else? And then at least the conversation is a bit more narrowed on what are we trying to solve. Yeah. Because usually if you're in that conversation, it means you're an engineering company. Yeah. Because you figured out, like, okay, this is what we're building, and we have, like, 5 out of X pieces already, and we just need these and these pieces, and then we can build it. But again, it's resources. It comes down to like how flexible will that system be. You're actually developing a product, in the end.
Yeah, and maintenance of it.
Maintenance.
Yeah, once it's built, then I have to keep it alive. Yeah. And then I think this all also ties into the topic of data privacy, because I think we can agree that we will probably have to do something with it, right? Whether we like it or not. And with all those separate tools, it's really hard to actually be compliant. Like to build a system where, let's say somebody pings you and says, I want my data, good luck, getting it out of all your separate systems. Mm-hmm. I do think that, let's call it the Snowplow approach, where you're going to have to invest a little bit more in setting it up and figuring it out. It's also a nice opportunity for you to configure it in a way and have like certain flags with every data type, right? You can have a flag with from a GDPR perspective, like this is category 1, 2, 3, and 3 is the most sensitive. I don't know, something like this. It does open up the door for a lot of those opportunities. Is it also something you see happening already, or is it mostly out of other reasons that people are moving towards those kind of stacks?
I would say it's mostly out of other reasons. I don't think the legal drive is really like what's pushing people to that maybe more unbundled approach of the data stack, self-hosted.
I do think, I'm not sure whether that's the legal part, I mean, the fact that we are now all pushed towards either GA4 or something else. I do notice more companies looking at their stack again now. It's sort of, this is the moment where you reconsider. Anyway. You have to consider change, or you have to change anyway, so your history is screwed anyway. So this is the moment to make a decision. Yeah. So I challenge every company we work with, like, all right, if you ever want to reconsider, now, and not next year, now. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then the discussion about privacy does come up, of course, quite a lot, especially because there's so much unclear about how this is developing. And you could say that if you choose for GA4 right now, you have to accept that you'll be part of this, call it the war between legislation and Google, which is sort of going back and forth all the time. Google making a change, another lawsuit, Google making another change.
It's mostly uncertainty that's been driving that instead of the specific reason.
Yeah, but then again, I think it's never finished, right? What we're seeing a lot is like, even though the stack might be like we're in progress of building one or it's completed, now for us a lot of questions that we get is like preference centers and like how do they integrate with that? Because we have an ESP and it used to be stored there because it was only marketing automation, but now we have an app, a website, and some other interface, and we need to centrally access it, and how is that going to then relate to everything? Because now we have this customer 360 view and we're funneling everything out from there, but the preferences are not mapped, so I could have an ESP where the preference is not synced, and so we're still sending out that email, and so it becomes a very technical question very quickly, even though it's linked to the data stack, how it's evolving, how legislation is forcing companies to rethink how to engage, etc. So you'll never be finished, I think.
I think I recorded a podcast with Aurélie, so she doesn't look at it from the technological point of view, but more from the DPO point of view. And she mentioned like one of like her dream would be if companies create like an open standard about how data integrates on the back end. Like if company A gets a request, that they can send a signal to all the other tools that you work with, right? And that they also know what to do with that request and handle that somehow. We're far away from that right now, but I think I do agree that we don't want monoliths, right? We don't want everything under one company. So in the end, we're gonna have separate tools. So we're gonna have to build some form of integration. Otherwise, we cannot comply anyway, right? Because it will. We could hire a lot of people to do it manually, but that would still not, probably not be enough. But it's a hard problem to solve because we started out with building, all this cool stuff and a lot of complexity, but it gives a lot of options, I think, like for companies that have the ability to build it and to use it, it's really interesting to build this advanced marketing technology stack. But with every added component, you're also adding a little bit of risk on top from a GDPR perspective. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the question, first of all, applies also to technology itself. The more The more you stack together, the more risk of things breaking.
Yeah.
Everything you will add will break, first of all. From a GDPR perspective as well, to some extent, it's something you need to really, in any case, monitor. I'm not sure whether building your own first-party data stack, or what you want to call it, will solve any of that. It's a problem you'll encounter anyway, and across everything. Multiple examples of that, websites which somehow add an email as a parameter in the URL, which is automatically sent to any tracker you'll use, independent of the tracker. So I think privacy in GDPR is a separate topic of this, well, to some extent separate to this topic. The only difference being, if you do it in a first-party solution, then at least the data you send it, or the location you send it to, is quote-unquote yours, versus who can access it as well, black boxy-ish. So
yeah, I think there's one issue with that. I would say, like, from a legal point of view, everybody is like, currently the issue is, you're sending your data to a US-based company, and that's scary because the NSA can snoop in, or something like that, right? But if we're honest, probably the data stored at Google is probably better safeguarded than when we do it ourselves, right? Because how many people, if you build your own solution, how many security people are going to be there and taking care of that versus, I think probably Google and Amazon and Microsoft are doing a good job on that. This is an assumption, but right. So it feels like you're taking away from those big players, but by that actually means that you should add a security budget to your data budget as well, maybe.
Yeah, well, there's two separate components, which is it's typically still cloud based, even if it's in your own environment. Just to have the benefits, it's maybe hosted within the EU, so it makes it a bit easier there. But then yes, if you have your own BigQuery instance or your own Snowflake, then that needs to be properly secured as well. And access policies and so on still matter, which is not that easy to properly set up. Most companies give everyone admin access.
Yeah, I have some owner access somewhere where I shouldn't have owner access.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Person leaving, making sure their access gets revoked, and companies fall down all the time in those areas as well. So maybe, absolutely, maybe it is less secure if you look at it taking a step back. So it's maybe once you peel off that first layer, it seems better until you are in the reality of an actual company. Yeah,
we all know, like you said, person, the admin leaves the company, 5 years later still have access with their personal Gmail that they once added, those kind of things. And that's just how life happens, but it's something to take into account.
Yeah.
Cool. I want to also ask you guys something about MeasureCamp. So MeasureCamp, how many for you guys is this? MeasureCamp Amsterdam, or just in general? I think, Glenn, you're a first-timer, right?
I'm first-timer in Amsterdam. This is my third, I think, but the first two were virtual. Okay. And I prefer this a million times.
No COVID ban there. And for you guys?
It's my fourth MeasureCamp Amsterdam, and overall, I don't know.
Many.
Between 10 and 15, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's my fourth in Amsterdam. So I was about to pick up the 5th anniversary shirt today. Last time someone decided that it was my bachelor party. I didn't know, so I couldn't make it. So it's my fourth here, and I think London twice. So I think 6, but I'm not really keeping count. But so we have a clear winner.
If we have people watching this later, or reviewing this, or right now, what's the reason they should come to MeasureCamp next time? Like, what's the main reason why you think you're here on a Saturday?
For me, it's the people. It's the informal conversations on the side which I enjoy the most. The talks are good and the sessions are good. It's definitely interesting ones, but it's mostly the people you get to meet, especially if you come over and over again.
Yeah.
I think I'm always surprised with how small basically our world of analysts is. Like, everybody knows each other, and if you don't know another person, you'll know them in 5 minutes. And everybody is willing to share. So there is no, that's secret, no. Everybody is willing to share with competitors. I mean, basically, we are here 4 competitors at a table if we're looking at it formally, and everybody is open sharing, and that's how it should be. And that's really what I like. So you learn a lot about the field, about what is going on, and meet a lot of interesting people.
Yeah, I think it's from the outside view, it can sound like it's a very technical conference for geeks, but actually there's a lot of business people too, and you learn like what different types of companies are struggling with, startups, scale-ups, very big companies on how to centralize or decentralize teams. It's super cool to see like what's going on in areas where you might not be very specialized in, so it gives a good overview of the industry. And in general, people are super open to share. Like you said, like if you're an agency, it doesn't really matter. It's just like, hey, what are you doing, and what are you specialized in, what do you enjoy, and etc. It's good talks.
Yeah.
It's also interesting to see how the conversations have shifted. My first MeasureCamp was, I think, in 2015 in London, and the conversations were very different back then. Like data warehousing was a new concept. Most people attending was like, why would you do that? And that's like, it's not even a question anymore. Like the whole industry has moved on, and new topics have come up. If you look at the sessions that have been run today, I think everyone has come such a long way, and it's interesting to see that evolution over time as well. If you've come, because it's like you said, it's a small crowd. Like you see how the industry as a whole is evolving, because you can follow progress year by year.
Yeah, that's definitely fun to see. I'm almost thinking back a bit, and that's like this year it's really a lot about GDPR and Google Analytics and scary, right?
Yeah.
But if you look back over the years, like a couple of years ago, we were there's such a big change.
GDPR is coming.
Yeah.
That was a big one.
GDPR is coming, sure. Now it's actually coming. Oh no, now we actually noticed something. Cool, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And we'll talk, grab a beer afterwards. All right.
Perfect. Cool.
See you.
Thanks.